In this video, there will be a detour from Victorian content to talk about a station in our northern neighbour state, New South Wales. Located on the T4 eastern suburbs and Illawarra line, Carlton Station is a small intermediate station in the quadruple track corridor between Walleye Creek and Hurstville. In Sydney, track corridors are generally much bigger than they are in Melbourne, with some examples of big track corridors being the entire western line up to Blacktown being 4 tracks, and up to Strathfield being 6 tracks from the city. Cabramatta to Glenfield is also 4 tracks. This flexibility grants a lot on the lead up to Carlton, because suburban trains, intercity and regional trains to Wollongong, Kiama and Port Kembla, and freight and goods trains can use any 2 tracks in each direction. Regional and intercity trains do not stop at Carlton, and only crossovers to allow this flexibility exist at Walleye Creek and Hurstville. The station opened in 1889 as part of the Illawarra line. The station remained relatively quiet, but as part of the Illawarra quadruplication in 1922, a second island platform was added to Carlton. Unlike Melbourne, Sydney did not electrify its network in 1919 and they still had steam trains running exclusively. But in the 1920s, Sydney finally got its network electrified, and with it came Sydney's own version of a Red Rattler for suburban service. The Sydney Red Rattler came with some massive advantages compared to Melbourne. With Sydney, Red Rattlers had windows cut in the sides of the carriages, allowing passengers to have a clear view through the train, something that passengers in Melbourne would have to wait 70 years for. And there are doors between carriages on the Red Rattlers, something that Melbourne passengers would also have to wait another 30 years for. For obvious reasons, Red Rattlers have been completely phased out, and the station is served by the Tangara fleet, with the very occasional Waratah, but only ever up to Hurstville. Because of a difference in power, Tangaras only run on the line, but Waratahs can partially run on the line. This is not a regular occurrence, and it would take a lot of luck to actually spot a Waratah. The area served by Carlton is relatively low-density housing, especially by Sydney standards, but there's one area around the station that has a decent shopping strip, and that gets a fair bit of use. The area around Carlton is very similar to a lot of early Melbourne suburbs that had stations like Eaglemont, Hoppers Crossing and Carnegie. Being Sydney though, surely they're going to whip out their fancy transit-oriented development to save the day. But it's most likely NIMBYs will stop that from happening. Honestly, Carlton is a beautiful, quaint suburb with a train station right in the middle, and a lively shopping strip. Walleye Creek and Hurstville are 2 great examples of transit-oriented development in Sydney, and they're both a short train trip away. It isn't like Melbourne where transit-oriented development is uncommon and underwhelming when it's actually used. But as transit-oriented development is built, another kind of development is lost. If you look at Chatswood from afar, you'd see only tall skyscrapers. You wouldn't know what it used to be. A beautiful old suburb of cafes, pubs and trams. A Westfield simply is not the same as that. But wait, just to be clear, I'm not a NIMBY. I will always be a YIMBY, especially in Victoria, but in New South Wales it's different. New South Wales has made a lot of effort to build around stations, and some stations are still almost completely devoid of life there. Looking at you, Denniston, Laytonfield. Sydney is taking massive strides to fix its housing crisis, which is even worse than Melbourne's by far. But Melbourne can just sprawl endlessly, Sydney can't. It won't be long before Geelong and Melbourne are connected by endless urban sprawl and roads. Obviously Sydney is not immune to this, and transport dead zones in Sydney stand out like a sore thumb. Looking at you, Oran Park, Ropes Crossing, and especially the northern beaches, also known unofficially as the NIMBY capital, where middle-aged sunburnt snobs have lived for over a century. This is most definitely an exaggeration, and there are some supporters of improved public transport, but to put it into context for Melburnians, imagine if the Frankston line was never built. All the train trips that could have never happened. The Frankston line area is the closest we have to the northern beaches, and the housing prices reflect that. The Northern Beaches does have the B line, however, which is a frequent bus service that runs from Mona Vale on the outskirts of the Sydney to Wynyard in the city's CBD. The B line is fairly new and it's a huge improvement over whatever there was before, most likely nothing. But a train line or a metro is pretty much off the table. But in my opinion, a light rail might work. I'm not sure what the community would think, but in my opinion it will be a fair compromise. But in an ideal world, a metro or train would likely run there. Back to Carlton. NIMBYism is nowhere near what it is in other parts of Sydney, but it wasn't like that back in the day. The line actually deviates from the most direct route to Sydenham at a time when Walleye Creek was little more than an industrial estate with no train station. The line deviates to serve Carlton, and Carlton Station was a catalyst for the suburb, having a shopping strip built around it, and it encourages locals to go there, and people alighting from the train have very easy access to amenities. This is the way it has remained to this day. However, there is one part of Carlton history that's actually rather tragic. In late 2024, around midday in June, everything seemed pretty normal, but a woman's pram rolled off out of her reach and onto the track. A good cemeterian leapt onto the track to act to save the twins that were in the pram as a train was rushing toward them. The man lifted the pram off the track and onto the platform with the train travelling at speed. The driver sighted the man and made an emergency brake application, but not fast enough. The train struck the man, killing him instantly. He was a hero and he'd saved 2 lives, but Carlton is not the same anymore. The events had already made it onto Wikipedia, where it takes up a third of the history section. As this video comes to an end, I would like to say that this will be the last video in the series for some time. The series is by no means over. There is only 7 videos at the time of writing, but I will be dedicating more time to videos of public transport in the city of Ballarat, its history of the tram network, stations and their demise, the so-called adequate bus network with a mere 2 stations that have survived, and the future. What could happen next? Will trams make a return? Will the buses of today be sacrificed for a better tomorrow? Only the future could really tell if transport improves, declines further, or even matters, because a glowing gaping problem with Ballarat that overwhelms public transport on the grandest scale has risen up. Cars. Yep, cars. I can guarantee that moving forward there will be more content about Sydney, and possibly even something that isn't about trains. That's a stretch, and it might be in a more distant future. Thank you so much for watching, and feel free to join our Discord server if you want regular updates on future videos, or just if you want to reach out to us.